If you try to get right, then you listen to my dad. He's a beast. And if you don't want to listen to him, okay, you don't want to get successful. If you ain't trying to dominate, man, then go listen to something else.
Welcome, athletes, top performers, and all those looking to gain that killer instinct, that edge you need to dominate in any environment. This is the Sports Motivation Podcast, and I'm your host, Niyi Sobo. I played ball and succeeded at the highest levels, and I'm now committed to showing you how you can accomplish the ambitious goals and visions that you have. This podcast is designed to teach you high-level strategy, not just fluff and hype. This will cut to the core if you let it. And by taking action on the practical and next-level advice I share, you will see results. Expect that. Expect to be more confident. Expect to be more focused. Expect to be more decisive. And expect to be more fearless. Expect to become the leader your vision needs you to become. So listen up. Take notes. Let's get to it. Welcome to the Sports Motivation Podcast. It is me, Niyi Sobo. I want to welcome you. If you're listening to this podcast for the first time, you picked a good episode to start. I think any of them would have been great to start with, but this is going to be a great one, man, because I am going to be laying out for you guys over the course of the next 4 episodes. I'm going to be detailing the process and the mindset behind those that are fearless. I want you to be fearless. I want you to approach your sport fearlessly. I want you to approach your life fearlessly. So what do I mean by fearless? Man, first off, let me just say, there's no human being in the world who doesn't experience fear, all right? No human being alive that can say they don't experience fear. But you're saying, well, how can that be? Because you talk all the time about being fearless. We see all these people in history who are fearless. That's how they're described. We see all these celebrities, these athletes who call themselves fearless. What do they mean? Here's what I believe they mean. Because again, you and I have common sense. We know that there is no one who can say they've ever been without fear. Fearless to me, how I define it, is the ability to act, to do what you must do in spite of how you feel. So it's similar to what we call courage, right? Fear has to be present in order to be courageous or brave. It means there has to be some sort of fear there to overcome, right? And so for you and I, what that really means is that we have to understand how our brains work. Do you understand? We have to understand how our minds work because our mind is our most powerful tool. But if not used correctly, it could lead us astray. I will kind of compare it to, I've never driven in one of those cars who has the automatic brakes, right? But there's these cars that have automatic brakes that brake automatically at some points. I think there's some Mercedes-Benz like that or something, right? And so imagine if these systems sort of went haywire and started just reacting to everything. These same systems that are designed to keep us safe are now working against us. But if we're not sure about how to operate it, it can do us no good. It can actually lead us to harm. So over this course of these next 4 episodes, I'm going to be breaking down some specifics about the keys, like DJ Khaled said, the keys to being fearless, the keys. What are the things that you must understand if you want to start to develop a dominant mindset and be fearless? All right. So let's get to it today. I'm excited about today because these are things that I never learned, honestly. And if I learned them before, I feel like I would have avoided so many mistakes, so many costly mistakes, relationship mistakes, mistakes in decision making, lack of confidence that showed up in certain, scenarios because I didn't understand these things that I'm about to lay out for you. All right. Let me break down how our brain works so you can understand and what that means for you in terms of being fearless. All right. First of all, in your brain, okay, in the brain that you and I have, we have a piece in there. It's called the amygdala. All right. Now, the amygdala, there's actually a great book called Performing Under Pressure. Brandon's going to include it in the show notes. It's a great book, Henry Wessinger and some other guy. And he talked about the amygdala, right? And this is you can, anyone who just Google the amygdala, Google the brain, and it's this almond-shaped piece that we have in our brain. And it's actually responsible for fear responses and emotional responses in general. All right. But the bigger picture is that our brains are wired to keep us safe. Our brains are wired to keep us safe. Just think, when you and I were hunter-gatherers, we had certain instincts ingrained in us in order to help us survive as a race, as humanity. We had to survive and procreate. And so we have instincts. It's why if you corner a cat, its instincts are to fight back. Its instincts are to live, to survive. So that is our most primal instinct, to survive. That is what our brains are designed to do. That's a breakthrough if you just understand that right there, all right? Because the question that I have for you right now is, are you in danger of surviving? Then that should tell you that most of your fears are not legitimate. But guess what? Our brains still react that way. Our brains have not caught up to all the technology and all the advances in society, as culturally. Our brains have not caught up. We still have the same brains that our ancestors had. And our ancestors used to really have to scrap for survival, but you and I don't anymore. We just have to figure out how to, score 28 points. We just figure out how to defend the best player. Is that a threat to our survival? No, it's absolutely not. But our brains are wired that way, all right? So back to the amygdala. So you have this amygdala piece in our brain. It's an almond-shaped piece. It's responsible for the feelings associated to certain events. Then we have we have another piece called the hippocampus. And in that piece is responsible for the facts, like what actually happened. The amygdala is responsible for the feelings or emotions behind what happened, all right? So check this out. Here's what happens when cortisol is released. And all that means is that when something in our environment scares us, we feel like there's a threat. We feel stress, our heart beats fast. And there's a lot of things that cause us fear and stress that don't necessarily have to, but because we're wired that way, we experience the fear and the stress. So for example, when you get chewed out by your coach, there's no real threat there, right? But the stress gets released because we're wired that way, because we are wired to value what people think of us. Because if we weren't accepted in a group when we were hunter-gatherers, that actually meant death. So we value the opinions of other people so much so that it creates stress. But this is just our old brain, our ancestors' brain, right? But when we think about it logically, because we also have the prefrontal cortex, which allows us to think logically, which allows us to apply reason to things, right? We know that our coach's opinion actually doesn't physically cause us any harm, but it still registers as that. So check it out. Your coach screams at you, right? The cortisol is released. It's a stress response. Or let's say it's, at the end of the game, you're afraid, you're fearful. That's natural. That's a natural response. The cortisol is released. Guess what happens to the hippocampus, which is responsible for the facts about events? It shrinks when cortisol is released. It gets smaller. Guess what happens to the amygdala, which is responsible for the emotional responses and the emotional memories? It grows. That's why we overreact when we're stressed out. That's why we become overly emotional when we stress out. So then you're probably asking, well, how do I stop that? How do I prevent that? Breathing. You must breathe. That's why, what do you see when these athletes are under pressure? What do you see them do? Consciously do what? Breathe. What did I learn as a firefighter before going into a fire, a burning building? When all of my human instincts are telling me to run and get out of there. But I have to quiet the amygdala. I have to quiet my stress response. I have to lower my cortisol levels. And how do I do that? By breathing. You understand? So just understanding that, just how our brains are wired in that way, should make you understand so much. Like, much of our fears are illusions. They're not even real. So let's go deeper, all right? Let's talk about Sigmund Freud for a minute. He talks about the pleasure principle. And it's this whole idea that human beings are wired to avoid pain and move towards pleasure. We want to totally eliminate pain and discomfort, and we want to experience pleasure. That's why it's so easy to sit down and relax when you want to work out. That's why it's so easy to eat these bad foods, because it causes pleasure. We're wired that way because back in those days, we actually had to move away from real physical pain. It was hard. It wasn't we didn't have homes that just kept us so safe, cars that drove us to and fro, have huge grocery stores where we can get all the food that we want. There's a reason why so many people are fat. It's because we're wired to love sugar and fat and salt, because it was rare to come by. So when we got fruit, it was like, oh, let me eat up all this fruit because I don't know when I'm going to get it next. But now we go into the grocery store and it's everywhere. Our brains are wired that way. You have to understand how your brain is wired, though, so you don't become scared like everyone else. You have to understand that. So this pleasure-pain bias, right? We are wired to avoid the things that are painful. But let me ask you something. As an athlete, as a high performer, as someone who's trying to accomplish at a high level, isn't it true that you're going to have to do a lot of things that are very painful, quote unquote? Isn't it true that you're going to have to lift heavy weight that your body is saying, no, don't lift that? Isn't it true that you're going to be sore the next day? Isn't it true that it's going to be much easier to lay down, sit down, and relax, eat some chips and salsa? Isn't all of that true? You and I are alike. All human beings are alike. So what that has to mean to you now is that you have to ignore a lot of those signals and use your conscious, rational mind. You have to ask yourself what must be done and ignore the emotion. And here's where a lot of people get it wrong, man. And this is where I actually really feel strongly about this, because I've actually witnessed people that I love get themselves in legit trouble over this concept right here. This idea of listening to your emotions. Now, all right, let me back up real quick, because you know that a key element of my philosophy is that I believe that beliefs lead to your emotions and how you feel. And that emotions lead to actions. Actions lead to results. So you're probably saying, well, what do you mean you can't focus on emotion? You shouldn't listen to your emotions. Human beings are wired with certain beliefs, certain associations, that to do this means pain, right? So those are the very things that we have to challenge through our beliefs. This is why mental conditioning is so important. But here's the reality, is that your instincts are going to lie to you a lot because you're a human being. Your instincts will lie to you. Now, the goal for you and I is to condition our beliefs to such a degree that we produce emotions that facilitate the actions that we need to get the results that we want. That's the goal. But in the meantime, newsflash, you will feel negative emotions. You will feel like you don't want to do something. You will feel like you shouldn't follow through. You will feel like you shouldn't take that shot when you should, because you haven't wired yourself to such a degree that that becomes instinctual. So when you see a basketball player like a Michael Jordan, you ask him, are you scared to take that shot? What will he tell you? Hell no, I'm not scared. But if you ask him, were you ever scared? Of course he was. He conditioned himself to be rid of that fear. So does that make sense? So in the meantime, as you're conditioning yourself, just know your emotions will lie to you. You will wake up in the morning and feel like you want to go back to sleep. That does not mean you should go back to sleep. Just because you don't feel like working out or you don't feel like doing what you must doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. My favorite book, 50th Law, he said, Robert Greene, he said, we had a primitive fear of nature, right? But then it led to what? A generalized anxiety about the future. Like now we live with these generalized anxieties. They're not real. They're not based on anything legit. So you and I have to understand, listen, we are safer than we've ever been. We are safe, y'all. There's not a lot to be afraid of. I'm even thinking about how many people are afraid to start their own businesses or afraid to leave a job, afraid to leave a relationship. Listen, there is plenty more women out there, plenty more men out there. If you are in a relationship where you're not happy and they're not treating you well and they're not getting with the picture and you're staying only because you're afraid that you might not find somebody else, that's your emotions lying to you, all right? Because rationally, you understand there's someone else out there for you. If you're afraid to leave that job just because however much you get paid per hour and your little benefits, there is a way for you to earn that and like 10 times more as an entrepreneur. There's a way. I'm not saying it's easy or it's simple, but it certainly would be worth it. Wouldn't you agree? Or do you want to spend the rest of your days on this earth slaving away for someone just for the sake of some security and a little paycheck? You don't got to be as scared as you think you do. So what now? With this knowledge, what do you and I do now? How do we approach this? Now that we understand that our emotions lie to us a lot, now that we understand our brains are wired only to survive, but that we do have a conscious, rational mind that's a powerful tool that separates us from animals and beasts. That's how we're different, because we can use our rational mind and we can think, we can plan, we can mastermind, we can see the future, we can look ahead, we can simulate. What do we do now? This is what I want you to do. I want you to get really clear. Number one, what are you scared of? So what are the things that you're scared of? You're afraid of, to take some shots in the game. You're afraid to see your roommates see you meditating. You're afraid of what somebody's going to say. You're afraid of failing. Why? Why are you afraid of failing? Define your fears. Then ask yourself, what's the worst that can happen? Get clear about it. What is the worst that can happen? Honestly. I mean, the very worst. Okay, you get kicked off the team. Okay, you people talk about you bad for 3 months. You go broke and have to live back with your mom's house. You don't find another mate for 3 years. What's the worst that can happen? And then I want you to ask yourself, is this very likely? Is this likely? These things that you just listed out? Then the next thing is, how can you prepare for the worst? So how can you start preparing right now for the worst that can happen? This is a stoic philosophy mindset. You think about the worst that can happen. Don't avoid it. Don't listen to people who tell you don't think negatively, quote unquote, about the future. There's a great book actually called The Power of Negative Thinking. Bobby Knight, coach, crazy coach. What is a great book. And it makes sense. You have to understand, and I'm not saying you don't have to come at it from a negative state of mind. You can approach the harsh realities from a positive state of mind. And by positive, I mean empowering, productive state of mind. It doesn't mean all flowery and, upbeat. And then I want you to sell yourself on the benefits of why you need to do what you must. So what do you need to do now? What are you scared of? But what is it that you need to do now that you know that your emotions lie to you? That your brains are wired only to help you survive, not to succeed. You have to figure out how to do that. It's like an oven, man. An oven is a powerful tool, but it's not going to create a feast for you. You have to figure out how to manipulate the heat. You need to figure out how high to turn it, when to take the food off. You don't want to have to saute it, add the spices, but the oven can do the work for you. And there's a lot of science behind that you might not understand. It's a powerful tool, but you got to understand how to use it. All right. So I want you to answer those questions and start to get excited, because on the next episode, part 2, I'm going to be breaking down how to live by rule, how you can develop a purpose around your life and some rules for yourself, so you can start to take this fearless mindset and actually bring it out into the real world and start to apply it. All right. So answer those questions. See you on the next episode. Let's go. Thank you for tuning in to the Sports Motivation Podcast. Make sure if you dig in the podcast, go and subscribe so you can always get the latest episodes. I come out with a new episode twice a week on Tuesday and Friday at 3 a.m. Eastern. And make sure you go ahead and rate it and leave me a good review. As always, I appreciate you tuning in, and I'll talk to you soon. Much love.
One of the most common questions I get from athletes all the time is this: what is the single best thing I can do to reach my goals? How can I set myself apart from everybody else? Obviously, there are a lot of things, but the one thing that's helped set me apart was having a coach, a mentor, someone to show me the right strategies and how I need to do things specifically to achieve my results. So you could try to do it on your own, but you'll end up making many mistakes that could have been avoided if you had someone guiding you and coaching you along the way. 99% of athletes in the world have expert coaches to show them the things that they can't see. If you want to work with me as your coach, I want you to go to IMNOTYOU.com/SRC and learn more and sign up for a free coaching session. I'll give you 60 minutes of my time for free, and I can teach you some dynamic strategies, plus show you how you can secure me as your sports results coach. All I ask is that you fit in this criteria. You're serious about your sport, you're willing to invest the time and money, and you have clear goals of taking your game to the next level, or some sort of specific results you want to achieve. This is definitely not for everyone, and I have very limited spots available for this. So, if this applies to you, I want you to take action. Go to IMNOTYOU.com/SRC, and I guarantee you're going to take your game and your career to the next level.